The K-12 Conversation is supported by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation, stimulating and encouraging Pennsylvania citizens, and especially business persons, to take a more active part in civic and political affairs.
Well, if the U.S. is going to catch up to the rest of the world, it has to be now. But frankly, it's not looking good.
It appears the once proud U.S. program has been relying too much on its reputation. I'd say they're completely unprepared.
Wow, this is an embarrassment. Oh, the U.S. can't be satisfied with this performance.
Former D.C. Schools Chief Michelle Rhee had some pretty nasty things to say about America's K-12 schools in this commercial that aired around the country. Her assertion is that American students are unable to compete with others around the world. Whether you buy her message wholesale or not, its provocative image begs the question, what can be done to make American schools better? And that's the question that led to the creation of this program. I'm your host, W.J. O'Reilly. Welcome to the K-12 Conversation.
The K-12 Conversation. Interactive, innovative, independent. Hosted by W.J. O'Reilly and Andrea O'Neill. The K-12 Conversation.
So, what can be done to improve our schools? Dialogue is the first step in that process. We could have started our first show with a focus on any number of educational topics, but we decided to go with a debate on national and Common Core academic standards. Some argue that adopting a standardized national curriculum is just the ticket we need to make all things right in our schools. Others would disagree, and disagree vehemently. But sincere dialogue is healthy, and that's certainly our aim today and in future shows. First, we've got to talk about the stumbling, bumbling American in the Michelle Rhee video. Is that really us? Is American education as pathetic as Rhee would have us think? How then did we manage to produce some of the most inventive, motivated, and influential people on the planet in the last 250 years? We asked our live studio audience, how would you rate our K-12 schools here in the U.S.? 8% said that they were excellent, 4% said that they were not so good, and 88% were in the middle. We asked you about the need for national core academic standards and curriculum. 33% said it was a good idea, while only 11% said it was not a good idea, with 56% undecided. Here's what the teachers had to say.
The great thing about the Common Core is that they're basically going to try and standardize or get everybody on the same page throughout the country.
The Common Cores are process skills. They're skills that help kids think critically, to analyze text, to cite evidence.
We tend to just focus on our content, and we expected kids to know how to read a science book, and we expected them to know how to analyze a math problem, the sample one in the book, and they don't.
For so long, it's been memorize the information, spit the information out on a test, and here's your 100. And now they really have to think, they really have to use their critical thinking skills.
First issue is probably implementation and curriculum.
I think in the beginning, it's going to be more difficult. We don't expect this from them. They don't know how to do it.
It's how we get there, the things that we do in the classroom to make meaning and learning relevant for students. It's not going to matter if it's Keystone, it's not going to matter if it's Common Core, it's not going to matter if it's, Pennsylvania state standards. If it's the pressure of taking a test and being evaluated on that one test, that's where the problem is.
The accountability should not just be a snapshot in time, a one day, a one test.
People don't understand the things that teachers are dealing with on a daily basis. The basic needs that are not being met. It's amazing the lack of equality in education. Common Core, if they can get the funding down, is a step in the right direction.
Andrea, it sounds pretty divided out there. What was your take on their responses?
Well, Pennsylvania is set to be ready to launch Common Core this July. These standards will direct the knowledge and skills students should have in order to graduate career and college ready. The education community has been working feverishly to prepare students for a much more challenging experience, and it seems this has been a tough transition for everyone involved. The concern seems to lie in how students are tested, how the new system will be funded, and how teachers will be evaluated. Also of concern is whether creativity will be adequately encouraged and if the test will be fair to English language learners, students with learning disabilities, or those with socioeconomic challenges. But as you illustrated earlier, many believe that we have to do something. So how do we make sure our graduating seniors are college and career ready? And is Common Core the answer? Let's start the conversation.
Thank you, Andrea. Let's introduce our all-star panel. He's Pennsylvania's former Secretary of Education, who will no doubt have much to say about the state's Keystone exam requirements. Please welcome Ron Tamales. She heads the General Electric Foundation's multi-million-dollar U.S. education program and is no stranger to the Common Core initiative. Welcome to the conversation, Kelly Wells. He is a national student youth advocate and doctoral candidate who is heard frequently on CNN. Greetings, Omekongo Dibinga. He's a national proponent of the multiple intelligence model and project-based learning, principal of the Howard Gardner Multiple Intelligence Charter School, and former school district superintendent Vince Rizzo. We might just as well start with a Michelle Reeve visual message. Are you down with her take on American education? Are we more than buffoons and losers? And will a Common Core save us from her dire assessment? Secretary.
There's a lot of great things that are happening in public education and education in general across Pennsylvania. And we're really making a lot of strides of making sure that our children are ready to succeed when they graduate from high school and go into college or go into the workforce. But we really have to raise the bar. We haven't looked at the quality of our academic standards in Pennsylvania in 15 years or more. And what we're doing with working with the Pennsylvania Common Core is really tying the expectations in the workforce of what our high school graduates need. So while we should say that there are certainly some challenges in public education, I think that's saying the obvious, there are also many great successes that are happening here. The bottom line for the state, the bottom line for the Commonwealth, is making sure these students, when they leave high school, they have the skills necessary to succeed. Mm-hmm.
So you would agree with her in a qualified sense that there are needs to be addressed, and you feel that actually Pennsylvania is in the process of doing that?
I think this self-assessment of trying to see where we are as public education is something that we have to do. You know, if you talk to folks, to people in higher education, if you look at some of the data, we have many of our community colleges in Pennsylvania where 30, 40, 50% of our high school graduates need some type of remedial education. You talk to some of our academic deans in schools, in colleges and universities, who's saying our children are not coming out with the math skills that they need. And then you talk to employers who say, well, they need some critical thinking skills. Sometimes they need to be able to write a strong, coherent cover letter. So we do have to challenge our system a little bit more. We have to do better. But that's not to say that I want to put a broad brush that we're doing tremendously. We have a lot of challenges across the system. We don't. We have to really step up the game.
Fair enough. Kelly, what would you add to that?
Well, I would agree with what the Secretary had said, and I think that what's critical is that there's pockets of success, not just across Pennsylvania, but across this country. And the problem is that they're isolated. And so what we really need to focus on is how we can expand to have that success across the entire country. When you look at the national average, 37% of kids that do graduate, that do go on to college, need some form of remediation. And we need to make that shift and that change. And when we sit around the table with countries from around the world, it's embarrassing to think that we're ranked 25th in math or 18th in science. And we really do need to make a fundamental change to say, we need to step this up. We need to look at an approach. And we're not saying that Common Core is the end game, but it's a start and it's a conversation and a dialogue that needs to happen in this country to change the way that we're educating our youth right now. if you think of it not just from a statistical standpoint, but you even think from your own child's education or what you see happening in the classroom today, it's not adequate. You know, it shouldn't be that you have a 400-page textbook and you go chapter by chapter and you're covering every single page there. Instead, it really, you know, my own child, it's about how do you get to the application? How do you get to that deeper understanding of knowledge? And you look from an English language arts perspective, I can honestly tell you that my own child, and then working with students that are implementing the Common Core right now, they're actually able to take a text and synthesize that text in record time, something that you don't see happening in today's workforce.
Amakongo, would you like to chime in on this? Now, actually, I want to add this. You came through the Boston Public Schools. You survived them. You went on. You're a scholar. You're a doctoral candidate at University of Maryland, Georgetown graduate. How did you succeed academically in public education?
Well, I think survived is an appropriate term to use, definitely. I was able to survive my experience really because I was able to get a foundation at home that would fortify me before I walked into school every day. I do see Common Core as something that should be added to the discussion, but our real problem that we're having in our schools is the inability for our educators to be able to establish strong relationships with our students, with the communities that they live in, whether it's issues of cultural proficiency, whether it's understanding the religious backgrounds that our different students are bringing to the classroom. And so for me, I went from 7th grade to 12th grade, for example, and read one book by a Black author, and it happened to be Invisible Man, which was very appropriate for my experience. And so at the end of the day, we need to we can have Common Core, No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, Race to the Bottom, whatever we want to call it. But at the end of the day, if we can't have a system where our students feel like what they're receiving, as a teacher said in the clip we saw, if they're not receiving something that's relevant to their lives, none of it's going to make a difference at the end of the day.
Thank you. Vince, you are the multiple intelligence educator, consummate multiple intelligence educator. Do you find any common ground with the Keystone agenda?
Well, I guess it would be probably more appropriate for me to disagree. I don't. I don't think there's anything wrong with having standards. I think that standards, and I think that having goals within educational programs are actually appropriate, and that's something we should all aspire to. On the other hand, I find that the unitary assessment that we use to gauge whether or not we're successful.
Explain what that means, please.
Well, we're assessing on one level. We're assessing students based upon well, let's just look at the Common Core, for example. You have David Coleman, who's the head of ETS. He's really at the forefront of Common Core, and if you look at that kind of a test, what are we asking students to do? By the
way, ETS, Educational Testing Service, kind of the forebears of the major, the SAT, and all the College Examination Board.
If you take one of those tests, there's a right answer and there are 3 or 4 wrong answers. And in the real world, that's not the case. The real world is much more nuanced. And so a multiple intelligence aspect, a school that focuses on multiple intelligence, takes into consideration a lot of other things. How do students demonstrate that they understand the content? And to have a test in which you're simply looking at a paper and pencil test, bubbling in answers, and not taking in all of the other skills, all of the other talents, all the other strengths that a student might have in order to be able to demonstrate understanding, is to shortchange the student.
Kelly, actually, I want to ask you a question. I know that the work of your foundation through General Electric is actually helping to improve what the schools are able to deliver to students so that they can produce great employees of General Electric. So how does this all fit together in what we've been saying?
Well, I think if you think about, the work that we've done, we started off with 7 school districts across the country, and unfortunately, we can't fund every single school district. But what we found from that was a kind of a core, that if we really brought in and we worked in a collaborative manner with the teachers, the board, and the superintendent, if we looked and addressed curriculum and instruction, and then the third component is how do we leverage our GE volunteers? How do we bring that pro bono expertise? We could actually start to change a system, change that dialogue. So when the Common Core kind of came on board with all of this, what we found was that this was a way to raise the bar, to basically say we are going to go back to this whole belief. We have to believe that all children can